since this is a podcast that just is our ongoing conversation in the house, I think the only time guests come on, it should be if they're also house guests, because then you're naturally involved in the conversation in the house.
In the family room conversation.
I think that's the format that makes sense. Podcast.
So what are we going to do when we want Trump on?
I get so many... Shut up. That's the thing to do now if you've made it in podcasting and your family won't talk to you.
Yeah.
That's how you know you've made it.
So who do we have with us today?
We have Lacey here with us today. Needs no introduction.
Hello.
Lacey's staying at the house helping me post arm lift. How's it been, guys? How's it been being my arms for the last 10 days?
You can call me Scratch Daddy from now on. I'm the scratcher of the itchy arms.
He's been jerking off my arms.
Yeah.
The itching post-surgery is the worst part. I mean, not being able to do anything for myself sucks balls, but the itching.
I don't know how to say this without sounding like a weird martyr, but the idea of you being strapped to a bed with no arms was so exciting to me.
Little dominatrix.
So exciting. I mean, I even believe I specifically manifested it because I am a specific manifester in human design. And I was telling my partner like 6 months ago, I just need like a week with Jessa in bed. I need something to happen so we just hang out in bed the whole week. I feel like since the pandemic, it's weird hanging out with people. And since I got sick, it's like weird even texting. I'm the most clunky texter. And I feel like we should all be spending a week in bed with each other as friends.
Heard it here first, folks.
I really do. But I was like overly excited about the fact, and even like you telling me about it was really clunky. You were like, yeah, I might not be able to use my arms for a couple days and you can just come hang out. And I'm like, wait, like be your arm doula? Like you're going to allow me to get things for you? But then being in the energy, I have felt like a failure of a doula and that I'm not doing enough for you. But you do have a sort of independent aura, and I know I can be a tad suffocating. So I'm trying to like balance being mindful of that and still showing up for you and just completely being oblivious because I get so excited to just connect with your energy in the moment. But I feel like it's so beautifully intimate to spend a week in bed with your friend. And that, like, I keep making it sound sexual, but I don't mean it in a sexual way at all. I just feel
you want
like...
me to sleep upstairs tonight and you can sleep in my bed?
I've been meaning to ask.
I like when you told me that story. You said, I think I manifested you being in bed for a week. And I said, well, I'm glad it was an arm lift and not like a car accident or whatever. And you said, well, no, I mean, I think I assumed it was probably plastic surgery. I have a brand.
Yeah. But I can be mothering and nurturing, but it's just like an energy shift, a power shift, a energy around receiving, you know?
Yeah.
What do you feel about the energy of receiving, Mark?
I think Jess is really bad at it.
Oh,
But,
I don't.
Well, no, I mean that I'm like poking fun because I think it is in the beginning. I mean, you are very independent and don't really enjoy asking people to do other things for you. But in this situation, it's like you are forced. You literally don't have arms. So like half the things you want to be able to do, you literally can't. And I think in the beginning, it was funny to watch you struggle with that. Like, I mean, this has happened maybe before too. But yeah, so it's like a funny awkwardness that, again, it's like cute the way that you're like, can you do this for me? Or when I'm doing something for you, you feel like a fish out of water. You're just so uncomfortable with it. But then I think it finally, after 3 or 4 days of it, it became more natural. I could see you like asking for things and not feeling stupid and just confidently, like kind of being in your helplessness.
Yeah, we did get into a flow. I'm someone who can't like let friends help me move without offering them money. And I do have, I think, like a tally in my head. I'm never keeping track of like, I did all this for other people and they never did anything for me. I don't have that voice in my head at all. But I do have I done enough for this person to ask them for a favor?
Yeah.
And every time it's like, can you make me a matcha? Like I have like a thing that comes up in my brain that's like, exchange rate, like what can I do in exchange? It's like I could do nothing. I could tell you a story, which I think I could really just offer to not tell you a story, and that would be a gift now. So yeah, it's I'm over it. I'm done. It's been
You've done good though. I think it's I can't imagine not having arms for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I
don't have them at all. We left them with the surgeon, and then they're going to mail them back.
Yeah. You're just a nugget. Half nugget.
I feel like you've been really open to receiving, though. I feel like we have this message with the feminine that the feminine can't receive, the feminine can't receive. And you have been open to it. And I feel like you're really gentle and kind in it, even when you think you're not. Jessa's wearing these compression sleeves on her arm, and she has stitches on her arm, like in her armpit. And compression sleeves are not comfortable, and it looks rough. It looks real rough. And Mark and I were like pulling them down and pulling them up, and Jess is like, that hurts. And, we were trying to not cause any pain, but like they're very hard to maneuver. And it's hard to explain with your words how to do like directions.
That's been the worst part, is when someone's doing something for me. This has really highlighted how many sensory issues I have, that like I have just found natural workarounds, like how tight the ponytail has to be on what spot of my head, how tight my shoes need to be, the space between my socks and my toes, like having someone else do those basic things for you, and then already feeling kind of weird asking for stuff, but then having to correct people, or I don't like my hair once it's wet, I don't want it touching the back of my neck. Like that has been really highlighted. And then I learn through hands-on, and I teach through kind of hands-on also. And the compression garments, I have experience with compression pants, so I know these like tricks, but I don't know how to articulate how to use the compression garments, right? And so there's been so much tension. I was like full-blown breakdown yesterday from like impatience. I'm someone who has to move very fast. I move very fast, and I live in my sacral. So I just like do what I want when I want to. And like yesterday morning, I woke up way before everyone else and couldn't get my own hot beverage. And I have this like thing in my brain that the hot beverage is supposed to happen within like 5 minutes of waking up. And so, yeah, this is every time I'm going in through a big learning transformation, impatience is often the thing, which is kind of stupid. Don't make the fastest being to have ever existed and then expect them to learn impatience is bad.
That's why you got to be put in a bed with no arms to learn it.
And projectors were so slow. We're so slow. Like, I'm so slow anyways. I can't speak for Mark.
He's very thorough. Well, Mark's very thorough.
Hey.
But I was like watching you, I was telling Lacey, like I was watching you rinse out the washcloth in the shower the first time you gave me a shower, and I was like, oh.
I felt you hawking me watching that.
Today I just took it and rinsed it out.
Thoroughly rinse that thing. You gotta,
Yeah, but I feel like you just gently told us, hey, this hurts,
No, I think I got pretty frustrated.
In my experience was you were like, hey, this hurts. Mm-hmm. Like, I didn't have the experience of you getting frustrated at us. But I got like a call, so I went upstairs, and then Jessa texted me like explaining your frustration, and I just thought that was like so sweet, because I'd be screaming, cussing, throwing, and breaking things. So it's just interesting to see different people's expression of like frustration.
Yeah, the difference between an Aries moon and a Pisces moon.
Yeah.
Also, it's my favorite thing ever is if you've ever seen me and Lacey standing next to each other and the sound of our voices, I get mistaken for being a hard ass, and you would think that Lacey is very soft and very sweet.
Yeah,
but
you guys should have opposite voices, really.
It's like the complete opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's interesting what you were saying about exchange, like how you kind of bring up this sort of mathematical chart when you're asking someone for help, because I was sort of meditating on the energy of exchange the last few months, because we talk about the new world being more a form of energetic exchange, you know, instead of like capitalism or paying each other. It's like, I'll do this for you, you do that for me. And like through my meditation, I got the message that like exchange is actually very toxic and isn't very different from like our money system. Mm-hmm. And exchange can fastly fall into the category of keeping score. And I even do like a lot of exchange stuff within my own body. Like if I buy this $200 supplement, it must have an exchange rate of healing my body in a certain way in a certain amount of time, or it's not going to work. And through my meditation, like what I kept hearing is everything's actually an ecosystem. And we're here to like nurture our ecosystem. Like I'll put this supplement in and it will affect the ecosystem. And I'm supposed to watch and listen to how it affects it. And it might say I need to eat something different now, or add another supplement, or take something out without there being just such a direct transaction, a direct exchange. And I think about that in even like community or connecting to others. It's like, I'm just going to give you this love right now or this service without considering how there will be an exchange rate. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah. Well, that's you're perfectly describing the constructs of the cross
the
of
human
planning.
design. Yeah, so I was thinking.
So the bargain, which is I'll scratch your back, you scratch my back, is a construct of the cross of planning.
Okay.
And our relationship to money or currency is a direct reflection of that. The cross of sleeping phoenix is I'm just going to do what I do, which comes naturally to me, and I'm going to express where it feels naturally to me, and I'm going to like be intimate where it feels naturally to me, and I will trust the universe will compensate me accordingly. So I don't, when it comes to giving or helping other people, that exchange, as far as I'm concerned, is like between me and the universe. So yeah. I'm an agent of abundance in someone else's life, and the abundant, like the universe takes care of me. And I'm not like doing it to be taken care of, but I don't have, to the best of my knowledge, unless that's like a shadow I don't know of, I don't like wait for somebody to give me something back. I don't even think about it that way.
Yeah.
But I think because I didn't have nurturing caregivers as a child, I think I've had a lot of experiences in my life where people weaponize helping me.
Yeah.
I think the abuse that I experienced was under the guise of like weaponized help. And so for me, it doesn't feel safe. And it's so much better now. And for a long time, not being nurtured or not being taken care of showed up as like, I feel like I'm sitting in the middle of the room crying for help and nobody sees it. Yeah. So when Mark and I, early in our relationship, there were times where I felt like I needed a lot of help and I thought it was really obvious that I needed help. And then, I didn't get it. So I just took it as like, he doesn't want to help me. And then later when we're unpacking it months later, he's like, you showed no evidence of needing help in that time. And in my head, I'm asking. But what I've learned is I wasn't like, you're not asking if you don't directly say, please do this. And I think that that's what I've gotten really good at, is just like.
Yeah. And you have to walk my poking at you back up. It wasn't, I think in the beginning of it, there was like this, the habit of being like, oh, this is cringy, and you're uncomfortable for a day or so. But then it's, especially compared back to like the miscarriage when all that happened, this is like you're way ahead of that. Like being able to just confidently ask and communicate a bit more has gotten way better.
Yeah, we were talking about things that you do as like a defense, like when you feel like you're in a weakened state, what do? You know, when you feel like you're in a weakened state, like for you, Mark, you like isolate. You have like a cat. Like I need to go isolate to be safe or whatever. And I rely on hyper independence when I feel like I'm in a weakened state, or specifically if I feel like threatened. And I think what's really difficult with situations like post miscarriage, because I had lost so much blood, like I literally couldn't leave the bed. Like they didn't want me to leave the bed to walk to get a snack, because if something were to happen and I bled, it was bad news. And this as well, where it is, if I feel, and I guess this is what happened yesterday, like if I feel threatened or overwhelmed or whatever, thank God there's been no conflict or anything, because that's where that really shows up. I comfort myself by huge displays of independence. Do you remember one time Mark and I had an argument? He went down to the studio to cool off, and when he came back, I was trying to carry a bunk bed up the stairs. They're not successful displays of independence.
I remember one time there was like a little argument, and then you came into the house and I was staying with you at Nashville, and you're like, we got to move beds upstairs. And I was like, what? Do you remember us
maybe it's not
beds?
displays of independence, it's just moving of beds. Okay, well, so I feel a little bit foggy and weird still, so this is probably not going to be very long. I'm still 4 days away from being able to use my arms, and my energy kind of sucks, but it is November 23rd, and we just finished watching the Bashar live stream where they clarify the statements made that we've discussed on this podcast. So we thought it might be fun to just talk about that a little bit. We bought the live stream, and then as we were getting ready to come in here, Mark yelled, "Let's go Starseeds."
That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
We're a group of Starseeds trying to get the latest download.
Oh God. That's pretty much was the vibe in the live stream comments. So
what is your thoughts on Bashar now after seeing that?
Here's what's been happening for me, and I guess, Mark, we haven't really had time to talk to see what you're thinking, but since a little bit before, and maybe this is just the lens I'm seeing the world through, but since a little bit before Pluto went back into Aquarius, I feel like the name of the game right now is the exposure of corruption. And I know we've been in exposure of corruption for the last 4 years, but it's been very tribal, where it's like, the left can see the right, and the right can see the left, and the Christians can see the this, and it's been very tribal. And I feel like what's happening right now is a unilateral exposure of corruption and propaganda and bullshit. And it's so loud to me. It's always kind of loud to me. I always hear a whole different set of what's happening than what is being presented. But it's so loud to me now, I feel like it's available for everyone to see if you just choose to see it. I guess I want to start here. It opens up with them selling a crystal. And it reminded me of like TBN. Somehow worse production than Trinity Broadcasting Network in the 90s. But that vibe of like selling the crystal for contact, to sync up with the frequency of contact. I don't not believe in that. And I don't have a moral issue with selling that. I don't have a moral issue with making things and selling them.
Right.
I worked through that part of the matrix. I don't have an issue with it. If you make a product, you can put energy into anything, but especially if it's made of crystal or energy conducive materials, and you can put an intention in it and you can sell it. And I think that that's fine. So I don't have a moral issue with it necessarily, but I feel like the business that is Bashar has gotten very loud to me recently. I think it was loud to me once when I got on the website to buy maybe one of these live streams or something once, and was just like, oh, this is a whole operation.
Right.
People like, this is multiple employees or whatever, which once again, I don't have an issue with. But if you have created something that is somewhat of an empire or is making a lot of money, like that becomes its own motivator, and you might not consciously be aware of it, you know? So that's just going to make me turn the discernment up higher.
Yeah.
But it's also just kind of, I don't know, it's just reminded me a lot of Trinity Broadcasting Network, where it was like,
I had this theory,
prayer cloth, Benny Hinn prayer cloth.
Yeah.
You know?
I had this theory, like early in my awakening, I was talking to other like artists and filmmakers about like, what is this thing with spiritual content? And like Gaia is the greatest example. Like early on, I would just go on Gaia and try to like search for anything to get new knowledge. And every single documentary, some of them good still, like good message and stuff, but the production value is all in this 90s era, very bizarre thing that for me as a like aesthetic artist, it does like, it makes it more difficult for me to kind of engage with it, because I'm automatically thinking this is Bobo from the 90s. And like, and so that was always something that I was like, man, I want to get into that world and help make it cool and artistic, like really cool spiritual ideas in an artistic way. But then I started thinking, I was like, I wonder if this is part of, there's like a reason that I don't think they consciously know, but there's almost like an energy that's like inspiring these people to make films. They do it in that way, so it stays somewhat not like a part of pop culture, because then it would blow the whole thing, you know?
Right.
So is it purposely, do they purposely make it that way so it stays in a specific limited vein as to not make that knowledge super public, and then, you know, they get rid of it in some way? You know
like
what
a
I'm saying?
barrier to entry. That has been my theory when I'm being generous, I guess. I'm not
and
feeling
that's all I'm
super
saying is like
generous
I
today.
wanted to believe it that way, but I now watching this today, I'm just like, yeah, why? It only adds discernment. I'm just going to be a little bit more skeptical now.
Yeah.
You know? I don't like the selling thing, and he's always done that with the sites. Like early on, when it wasn't on YouTube, you had to buy the things. And I remember because I bought a lot of them, I was obsessed. But I remember like halfway through being like, am I getting scammed here?
Now, I will say this, because there is a lot of critique of human design being behind a paywall. And this is my 2 cents on that. If you put a little bit of effort in, and like obviously now the closer we get to 2027, you can get almost all of this human design stuff for free. As someone who hid out on Patreon for the last few years, you have to understand that when you're talking about esoteric knowledge in the Matrix comes after you. And if the content that you are putting forward is balls out woo, and it gets grabbed by the mainstream, it gets twisted, and then people's impression of it is whatever the twisted version is. Like people don't, and this is the lesson of the moment we're in, is like, there's so much propaganda and spin and narratives about everything, because everyone has an angle and everyone is trying to convince everyone else that their perspective, and nobody, now I'm not going to say nobody, but most people do not take the time to go, I'm going to research where this rumor, that's what most people are living their lives, their perspectives are just filled with rumors, rather than I'm going to go investigate this human design thing and really understand it. They just hear these 10 descriptions of it and they believe those things. So hiding it behind a paywall until people are ready.
Yeah. I agree with that.
I get it, honestly. And
Totally.
To be honest, I also feel like I make a lot of things free, but there are a lot of things you have to put a little bit of effort into getting to hear me say. And that is because the larger the audience, the more bullshit you have to deal with. And, until very recently, I didn't have the nervous system to deal with the bullshit. And we also still had like a long stretch of time. So I think a lot of the reason that, Bashar has made these clips available and everything else could very well be for the same reason Human Design was behind a paywall and then started to open
I think
up.
I think that is thought through. And that's what I'm saying. Even the production value might be thought through.
Yeah. And historically, to get esoteric knowledge, you had to be an initiate who was like, and gone through all kinds of tests and shit.
And so, I get the real danger. That does seem to be lightning. But I also like seeing Bashar's kind of timeline up till now. It's getting a lot more popular. That's what also adds to some of this, probably what we're going to talk about the content that he talked about. It's like, again, just needing more discernment because it's somewhat big now. And like that's what I think a lot of people thought when he channeled, that something got in the way and distorted it. With what he said, I agree with some of it. Some of it is also skeptical, but that could be part of the distorted message that we're hearing, is that it is big now and there's a subtle distortion happening with it.
Yeah, so according to Bashar, there is kind of a merging happening between Bashar and Daryl Anka because Bashar is the future version of him. And so that might be why things are seeming to start to wobble.
Mm-hmm.
And that is kind of how those things work. You can't really judge this stuff through like a materialist physical reality, this or that standpoint, because that's not how things work. However, so spoiler alert, if you are planning on watching the Bashar live stream. So the gist in the beginning was this didn't come from the channel. Bashar doesn't really appreciate you doubting Bashar. Am I reading this right? Like,
I mean, he didn't say that verbatim, but I did think it was interesting. It's like right off the bat, he was like, okay, we're going to talk about this misunderstanding that happened. It's interesting too, because he's like aware of the trend. Is that coming from Daryl or is it coming from both? Whatever. They can see everything. So, but I just think it's really interesting that they even play into like, okay, it's trending in a way that's being misunderstood. Let's clarify. And he just gets into it and is a little bit defensive.
It is defensive, and it's also only talking to people who were upset about it.
Yeah.
It doesn't speak to the large quantity of people who took it as a riddle. He doesn't speak to the largest quantity of people who were like, yay, that means Kamala needs to win. Like, that was the greatest portion of people. There was that I saw, maybe that's the bubble I'm in. The smallest group of people were the people who were like pissed about it. And I don't know. I get it. Who knows, big, small, whatever, whoever comments. I have opinions. I very rarely comment on anything. So, but he zeroes in on that group as if it's everyone. And I am in a bitchy kind of place. And so my interpretation of this is also maybe not. It's through that filter of me being just kind of cranky with this. So all that
that's good though. I like that.
Full disclosure. Okay, so I took some notes. Do you have any thoughts so far, Lacey?
I just don't know if my thoughts are relevant yet.
Okay.
Because I want you guys to share.
Okay.
I have thoughts, but
I don't know if the way that I'm looking at everything through the lens of corruption right now, because I feel like that
is the theme. I think I agree with what you said earlier. It's like that's what is happening right now, and it's happening in a lot of obvious ways, but then it's even this more subtle thing. Like, who are you giving your authority over to?
Yeah.
We're all giving our authority over to Bashar in a lot of ways, like some people do.
I mean,
so is he trying to poke that? And are we supposed to see there's corruption in everything if you look for it and try to pick it out? And that takes a minute to burn all the subtleties of that off.
Yeah.
I feel like the Matrix would have crashed if we would have all been consciously aware that we are the alien, or that we have this higher, wiser self, and for lack of better words, that we have access to channeling at every moment. I feel like we came to this planet to have wild experiences, And if we all knew that we could access that higher version of ourselves in the cross of planning, the matrix would have crumbled. We wouldn't live in capitalism where we're like selling our soul for 50 hours a week or whatever. So I feel like during that era of time, we needed the Bashar because he's been doing this for like 20 years, right?
30 maybe.
We needed someone to like access the alien outside of ourselves. But now, and he's talking a lot about disclosure. And every time I hear disclosure, I'm like, you want disclosure? Go look in the fucking mirror.
Yeah.
Like that
or
is
open
contact.
contact.
Oh, open contact.
I mean, kind of the same.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for me to even sit and hear anything from him. I don't know if it's like the Hawaiian shirt or the twitching of the neck, but it's painful for me. It's truly painful, but it feels a little hypocritical to say that because when I was in a state of extreme illness and going in and out of the hospital, that was a time that it was really hard to access my higher self. I didn't feel like I could channel for myself. So I did need like positive affirmations on loop. And that's when Jessa told me about Bashar. And I did find it helpful. You said just let it play in the background, you know, because it will enter your subconscious. And I do that with Neville Goddard too, just letting him play in the background and Ram Dass. But at this point, we don't need anything playing in the background. I feel like we have such access to our subconscious now. And we're even seeing that in him, where he's integrating his person self and his higher self. And I feel like we're all integrating our person self and our higher self and no longer need that external channel.
Yeah, I remember getting a download in, or maybe it was a dream. I don't remember. A lot of times downloads for me are just like videos in my head of like higher selves that I've always seen as like a giant being playing like an RPG game or a VR game. I saw these giant beings coming down and climbing into, like putting all that light and all that power into the bodies of their avatars and then getting to play like this massive integrated first person shooter with all of that perspective that they have from the RPG. And I think that that's actually what's been happening for the last few years, that we are becoming, and this is what all of the healing has been about, is becoming aware of your subconscious motivations, of how your body works, of like what makes you tick.
Yes.
And integrating like all of that awareness so that you can play the game in a way that you could not play when you were unconscious. But
right.
As you go through that process, your higher self stops being a separate part of you. And that's really what the last like couple of years have felt like to me. The amount, and I want to say that I love Bashar and will continue to recommend Bashar short form videos for personal empowerment. So it just kind of doesn't matter also, like it kind of doesn't matter what the motive of the dude is. Like
right.
He has brought amazing art, which is why we have to remember that people are complicated and that you can't just put things in good box or bad box. It's a great tool for when you're trapped in the matrix.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're trapped in the matrix, and this could happen tomorrow with an injury. You get injured, like Marcus had this where he got like a nerve injury last year, and it will just like drag you down until you feel like, oh man, I can't touch my magic. You know, we've all had that experience, but I've definitely had that with Lyme. You know, like we go through phases like that. We suffer a loss, we're grieving, and we feel like we can't touch our magic. And then it's hopefully the people that are talking into microphones, you have access to that because that's the purpose of it. So it was like after the miscarriage, I had Joe Dispenza, who I've never listened to in my life, just playing in the background.
Yeah.
Because it's just putting something else into the algorithm while I'm processing a loss, so I don't just end up filling the algorithm with
Because when we get sucked into the underworld, it's usually a time of loss, a time of grieving. And when we go through a time of loss, a time of death, it's a beautiful gift because part of our programs are dying in those moments. It's like our slate gets wiped clean. And then it's so fucking important, the stories we tell ourselves when we're in the underworld. Like when I was like deep in Lyme, I had to be so careful with the story I'm telling myself. And that sounds so basic, as we're always talking about how we're writing our stories for ourselves. But especially when you're in the underworld, it's very hard to access the codes, the stories. So it feels like I literally need other people's affirmations through my ears to help write the codes in my body. And I really believe like when we sleep, a lot of codes are being written and rewritten. So I think it's very important to be conscious of what we're listening to in that sleep state. What do you feel like about codes in the underworld, Mark? Like, why do you think we get ripped into the underworld?
I don't know if I would say, I mean, I guess it works like being codes. I mean, I just look at it as to me, like a huge part of this thing with Bashar too, or I guess with more what you guys are saying is like stepping into the higher self, or the higher self kind of merging, I think involves so much. Like I understood that, I think, early on in like awakening, and it was always like this, I imagine it in my head, I guess, kind of like you're saying, like big beings, like this other part that's more ethereal, that part of me starting to become embodied more. And I would say like then having psychedelics, having altered states of consciousness, you're like, oh, so more of that like in every day, maybe, trying to figure out the feeling of it. But what's happened to me over time is like this core conditioning part of life that involves like there's an end to it, there's a beginning and an end, is in everything, like, and it runs your daily life. Like there's an urgency to get something done, or I don't have enough done yet, or I'm getting old and I'm going to be sick, time's going away. There's like this time that's clicking all the time that I think dictates like most of the shadow stuff. And when you actually let go of that, I've had very few times, but like where you feel like, oh, I actually feel the infiniteness of it and there is no death. That is to me a huge aspect of that higher self, this like fourth density being embodied, is there's like this crazy freedom. It's in the same, you're like in the same world, but there's this infiniteness that's what I think is so difficult, like to really have disclosure and get cracked out of this matrix. You have to like so quickly be able to imagine what a life is like that doesn't have a beginning and an end. And that's so difficult. And so I think the shadow stuff is like, when we get thrown into Underworld, it's part of like deconditioning those things slowly. And so I guess it is like a code, rewriting a code from the like bottom down. You have to get into that subconscious to actually slowly over time get the right coding and the right like awareness to hold when that higher self comes in, because it breaks all of our ideas of reality in such a way that, again, like I understood as knowledge, but until you start to experience, if you have like a moment where you're like, oh my God, I feel the infiniteness of me, and like death really doesn't matter. These are all these temporary experiences. So what does that mean then to me? It's scary, because like I'm knowing that there's a beginning and an end that if you're experiencing pain and suffering, well, there's going to be an end to that. So I can be safe. But if you go, oh, there's no end, I feel like shit right now. Like this is never going to end. How do I get out of this? I want to go to sleep. I want to die,
Right.
You can't ever have that escape. And so you have to jump into, then for me, it's been learning like, oh, it's infinite. I have to learn how to really manifest and choose what I want. Because if it popped right now and our higher selves were all in us, we'd create these crazy chaos worlds, because our subconscious is still automating everything, So clearing all of that out, I feel like it really is such a process, the deconditioning of what all comes back to just like death. Like what is the beginning and the end?
I do.
So going in the underworld is like where you experience that, I think, is where you're like face to face with some of those really hard truths that is like completely necessary, I think, until we get to a part where we all come in.
I feel like the worst times in my life are such a time of clearing and cleaning in a way I would never be able to clean if that didn't exist. But even you saying there's not a beginning or an end, like, makes me feel anxious.
It's the craziest weird feeling. Yeah. It's
because like that's how we measure success too. It's like we know when the end is going to be, and if like we do this good thing before the end, we're successful. Like when I enter a new relationship, I really like in my head, I'm constantly like, when's the end? When's the end? Because it's like a measurement of the energy of it.
Yeah, I think that that's why it's funny that this culture is built on the fear of death, because death is not scary. Infinity is scary.
It totally.
Yeah.
It like, never ends. There is no consequence that will bring an end. There is, like, I think that the end of the world stories that people tell themselves, they're actually trying to comfort themselves.
Ooh,
you know
girl.
what I mean? And like atheism is like, as far as I'm concerned, the most wishful thinking. Like you fucking wish your consciousness was one and done. Sorry. Actually, no. It just goes on forever. You cannot escape.
Yeah. And what I've been coming to is like, you can't fucking escape who you came here to be with. You know, like, I don't think I'll ever actually escape my family. Like, I think they live in my body. And the more I tell myself that I can escape them or cut them off, it's like we share blood. And the more I try to convince myself I can just push them away or cut them off or label them as bad or villain and me as good, then they become parasites in my body that feed off me. And we were just like, we're still in autumn, and it was like recently, Samhain, Halloween, like Day of the Dead, time of your ancestors. And like in meditation, I just kept hearing like, you have to like acknowledge your fucking ancestors somehow. And I've been telling myself I don't even have ancestors, like, because it's more comforting. Like what you're saying about the atheists.
We're going to call them atheists from now on.
Atheists, those atheists.
There's this whole side note. There's this whole experience here of feeling like a fucking baby. Like I'm trying to take care of Jessa, and I feel like I'm turning into an infant. I don't know what's happening. I swear I'm a good doula to other people. I promise. I have good reviews. Death and birth and postpartum.
Have you guys ever had sex with someone afterwards and then they talk about how it usually doesn't take them that long to come? Or sorry, they usually don't come that fast. That's when Lacey as a doula is like, I feel like I'm putting her back together about what a good doula she is. It's like, no, I really don't like to fuck for more than a minute.
I'm so sorry. Now I'm emotionally making you take care of me in it. But part of the reason I feel like a baby is like I went to put on Jessa's shoes today.
God, I wish you were here for that, Mark.
And I was just like literally trying to tie her shoes, and the laces, like a lace was sticking up, and like very slowly and methodically, like Jessa was teaching me how to like pull the laces in a tennis shoe to like make the shoe tight. And I like couldn't do it. And I just had to look her in the eye and be like, I have tied shoes before.
I was like, in my head, I was scanning, like, does she only wear Velcro shoes? Well, first she, because it was in the like laces. And so there was a huge loop and she left it. And at the moment that I was like, I can be fine with that. And she looked up at me and then she's like, I'm going to fix it. And then she starts pulling to tighten from further down the shoe.
Don't tell people that.
So I finally like reached down and started moving. I think you're over. What it feels like is you are overthinking it.
Yeah.
And if I get the idea in my head that I'm being an idiot, then I will be, or I'm being clumsy, then I will be infinitely more clumsy trying to prove I'm not clumsy.
Yeah.
So now it's just kind of a running joke, but Lacey will like hand me things from across the bed.
She has no arms. And I give her something like with a 3-foot gap. And then I just stare at her like, bitch, move your arms. Yeah. God, it's horrible. But it comes down to like truly loving you and having such big love for you.
Yeah.
And not like knowing where to put this big ball of love when you're someone who doesn't
3 feet away from me.
3 feet away is about where it needs to go.
Oh, but like, yeah.
It's been very entertaining for myself. I'm so glad to have you here. Just having your companionship has been
There's also
worth the loose shoes.
Yeah. And there's so many elements to it because like my trauma is being like, I would be told to do things a certain way. And if I didn't do it that exact way, there was physical violence. And that showed up a lot in the kitchen around making things, you know. My mom was a meth addict and how she operated was very much in the kitchen and everything had to be clean and organized and drinks had to be a certain way and food had to be a certain way. And Jessa's been the hiring manager at the local coffee
I'm
shop.
training a new barista.
Yeah, I'm learning how to be a barista right now. But there's this part of me that like glitches in the kitchen and feels like I'm going to break something here.
Right.
And there's a bigger message of I'm triggered by happiness and I feel very happy in the same space as you and Mark. And like your love and your consideration for each other is obvious and honest, but in such an autonomous way that I don't know outside of you guys if I've experienced that. So it's like healing and like brings up like curious feelings within me, just being surrounded like by that love and having love for both of you on an individual level, because that love and happiness triggers this feeling of I'm going to fuck it up. I'm going to break it. Because that's how when your family are alcoholics or drug addicts and something doesn't go right, the kids usually get blamed. You know, there's a scapegoat in it. So it's triggering, but also beautiful. And I don't know why I'm saying any of this.
Yeah.
No, it's beautiful. I like it.
Oh, I was talking about the energy of ancestors, though. And my witch friend, Rosie, was like, bitch, you got to feed those ancestors of yours or they'll feed off of you. And I do have this like crew of dead women. Like my mom died. My best friend from high school died. Our other close friend from high school recently died. And my friend Courtney's mom died. And this was all in the time of from like around 2019, 2020 till now. And I have been ignoring that connection as if like you're dead, now you're gone. But this energy of everything's infinite and everyone's infinite, like they're still there. And I'm ignoring that relationship and that connection. And I feel like by ignoring it, I'm suppressing it in the subconscious. And what you suppress in the subconscious often manifests in the physical body. And because I'm not feeding them, I feel like energetically they're feeding off me. Mm. And how I could feed them is like you can do it more in the traditional witch way of like building an ancestral altar and like bringing something to the altar as offering. But what I see it is like they want to have a psychic, telepathic relationship with me still. That relationship isn't dead just because they are. And how I could feed them would be to like listen to them. And I'm still.
Yeah, I'm terrible at that kind of shit.
Yeah.
What? Talking to your ancestors?
Yeah, talking to the dead. I definitely have like never had an altar or any sort of ritual, anything in my life. I don't know. I'm very like Piscean, I think. It's just like, yeah, it's just vibes. It's all happening somewhere.
Yeah, and that's what's so interesting. I mean, there's so many different ways to like understand what's going on, like life, consciousness, and all that. And like a lot of them, it's the same thing with like astrology for me. We were talking in the car, Lacey, like the same way where I'm not one that like really is reading my chart monthly and like forecasting and kind of trying to understand what's coming. It's always like I'm going to vibe through it. And then while I'm going through it, if I stumble into astrology, it's like I'm supposed to see it, supposed to get a little bit more understanding of, oh, this is what you're going through. And now it helps like add to it. But there's this thing that I've always done too, like in a lot of my seeking and spiritual stuff, that it's like vibes is my like what pulls me. I've never been drawn towards like the structure of ritual and stuff, but then even some of the ideas of what our reincarnations are, like the ancestors, the galactic federation beings, all of these different ways to like, they're just different storylines to understand like the self. And so it's interesting because there's times where I've had like deep feeling and connection to what I would say is like ancestor energy or like my dad dying. But I don't know if it's like, yeah, I mean, it's just all different options to do it. But for me, like, I have enjoyed more running with the gun, not running with the my great speech. It's just being more vibes and not adhering to anything that like I have to go do. I should be doing this more rituals to Hecate or something because of what I'm going through right now, astrology wise or whatever. But it's not to say that it's wrong, and maybe I'm missing something if I'm not doing that.
And like rituals is just a physical act with symbolic meanings.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're just connecting physical objects to
And
symbol.
I do rituals every day that are not, but they're not like intentional. I mean, they are intentional. You know what I'm saying? No, but it's just this natural kind of like, oh, this is a habit and this is something I'm doing. There's intention.
But that is a ritual.
It is a ritual.
Because you're using the physical with the symbolic meaning.
But I'm doing that through, vibe. It's just kind of a like, oh, this makes sense. This feels
I
good
feel
to
like
me.
that's the only way rituals should be done.
I know there's a lot of people in the New Age, though.
Yeah, but
and
you know, like
early
there's
on.
the like spiritual practice, and I know people who left New Age spirituality because they felt overwhelmed by the spiritual practice aspect. They went back to Christianity, and I was just like, you don't have to do
It's unique.
that.
It's individual to each person. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are very ritualistic people, though. Like after Jessa eats, like you have something warm to drink. Like that alone is a ritual.
Yeah, I
And,
think
like,
most things are a ritual.
Yeah. And I would say I'm like not very ritualistic in my life. Like I don't have like a routine or something set up, and I sort of wish I did. But I feel like I'm going against the vibes that are naturally happening because I'm getting energetic messages from these beings that are still in existence, and I'm actively like ignoring the vibes, which is like creating a reaction in my physical body.
Yeah, and I also believe that when people close to you die, like especially when they die when you're young, that they're guides.
Yeah.
And so it feels like your other guides are trying to tell you, like, integrate these guides.
Yeah.
And then the advice to lean into your family. I think what happens when we deem our family as bad.
Well, I'm not going to lean into those fuckers, but.
You know what I mean? Like, integrate.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of aspects of like my mom that I don't like. That's not news. A lot of them are in me, you know? Yeah. And so the more I, in the past, have like judged my mom, and there's years where I wouldn't talk to her or whatever, that didn't change the fact that when I look in the mirror, I see her face. When I hear myself talk, I hear her voice, you know? And so that ends up becoming kind of self-rejection. Yeah. And it ends up becoming more difficult to heal the behaviors we picked up from our unhealthy family members, because if you're raised by someone who's emotionally immature, we're both raised by meth addicts. Like you're raised by someone who's emotionally immature. Guess what? You're emotionally immature until you learn otherwise. And those things are always harder to heal while burdened by guilt and shame and self-rejection. So when we embrace that we came in through the family we came in through, and that whatever that it looks like for whatever, I'm just saying I can see why your guides are saying that, because it's more about like
acceptance,
rejecting
of
that self-acceptance. Yeah.
Acceptance of self, and don't tell yourself this victim consciousness story. And one of my victim consciousness stories is I can build beautiful connections and relations, especially with the feminine, but then they'll leave me. They'll be gone. I'll do something wrong and I'll be abandoned. And so in death can become a story of abandonment, a story of you left me. You're not here anymore.
Yeah.
Death is final. And what I feel like through meditation I'm learning is like what Mark was saying, is death isn't final. There is no end. and I can choose to like feel like a victim, because these women were my guides in life too. Like my mom wasn't a great guide, but she was a guide and steered the ship. And so was my aunt, who took me in when I was 15, when I ran away from my mom. And she died this summer. And like, she's still here and I'm ignoring her in such a big way. But part of it is because I'm victim conscious, feeling alone and abandoned.
Right.
When I could just like reach out and have a conversation and she'd still guide me the same.
And we were watching couples therapy. And the therapist said, you're not just dealing with, and we've all heard this shit before, but like, you're not just dealing with the two people, you're dealing with their parents and all their past partners. That's what that makes me think of. Right. Do you have to pee?
No.
Oh, I have to pee really bad.
You know, pee break. I'm just keep. Let's get more into some of the Bashars. Did we hit all the Bashar stuff?
Huh?
Yeah, we didn't hit all the Bashar.
So I'm just going to go through the notes real quick and then we can. I was maybe trying to make it go too slow. All right. So back to Bashar, some notes that I took from what he said. One thing he said that I thought was interesting was the way that he worded it. And he never gave clarification, as far as I'm concerned, on an interpretation of it. And that seemed very intentional. If we're taking this at face value, that this was a message from the Asasani or that the purpose was to force the split to move faster, or to accelerate the split of, we're all supposed to be going in our own directions right now, which I am aligned with that perspective, that we are drifting into our own individual realities. And this would help accelerate it. I do believe that. I do believe that's also politics is serving the purpose of that right now. Conflating female. Yeah, so this drives me nuts. Female is an innie, male is an outie. So when you call someone a female, you're talking about that person has an innie. Masculine and feminine is energy. Those are separate words, but specifically male and female means something different than masculine and feminine. We like use them all interchangeably. But masculine, he did not say masculine and feminine, because if he would have said masculine and feminine, I would have been like, he's talking about energy. So in the explanation, he starts mixing them together. He says feminine and then he says male. And so that's just, maybe they don't have like the full dictionary of what our words mean. I know that a lot of people in the US don't know the difference between those words.
Well, and he usually would, in the earlier comment, like he's notorious for in the past saying feminine energy, masculine energy, and describing it in that way. So the fact that he didn't include that in the first one and he said the woman and the man, I think was intentional. But yeah, it's interesting. Then on this other video, he tried to clarify saying it's masculine, feminine energy.
And then mixed in male and female, which is just a very American. And, you know, there's female biology, there's male biology, but there's also in, what am I thinking of? Like furniture or whatever. Or tools. There's like female or male,
yeah,
right?
Like plugs.
Right. So it's talking about something that penetrates and something that receives, right? Masculine and feminine are energies. If you're talking outside of energy, they can be characteristics, but it's vibes, you know? And something, thank God this isn't a fucking topic I've come across in a while, but like there was like debate about using masculine and feminine because they were gendered. And it's, to me, masculine and feminine energy are something very separate from the identity of man and woman and from the physicality of male and female, but we lump them all together in this culture. But I thought it was interesting that Bashar also was conflating the two of them.
Yeah.
Because I thought, when I went back and listened to it a couple times, if he had said the masculine and the feminine, I would have interpreted that completely different. But male and female is quite specifically talking about, those are bodies.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm being nitpicky, but that's more of a mistake that a person who lives in the United States or somewhere else in
and
the
it
West.
more just amplifies the discernment.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
So yeah, the forcing the split, I agree with. Feel free to chime in on any of this. So much emphasis on contact.
Yeah, this is the thing that I've mentioned before has always bothered me, is that there's this like Easter egg at the end of all of this that we're all waiting for. And so everybody's overly eager to get this damn contact. But what I thought was interesting is this time that he did emphasize contact is inevitable at some point. It depends on whoever's in power that's going to like influence that contact and the style of it, the intention of it, that's what he was speaking to. And so it creates, which I thought that was interesting, that he's never really said it like that before. He's always emphasizing that like contact is going to be great. And there's this like mediation, this peace bringing, which again is skeptical to me because of all the past times that's happened. And it's like, it looks peaceful when it happens. And then you realize you're in a trap for 100 years or whatever. So the fact that he was talking about the nuance of that, I thought was interesting. And again, that's my biggest skepticism about some of the Bashar stuff. But I think that it's also purposeful, potentially, like that he's saying it that way so we can choose to like how we want to interpret when that contact happens. But you can't convince me that there's any kind of like disclosure, full disclosure, and like full contact that is just positively oriented is not like what I think is going to occur. And because I don't think that that's where, again, this 4D kind of like higher self we're moving into is most likely not. It's like in the middle, it's balanced. It's not like all peace and good, and it's not all darkness. And so this contact is like, it's a option of like how you want to interpret it, really. That's the first time I've seen him come close to saying that overtly.
Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about like some of the harsher stances I've taken, like solid stances I've taken on this podcast. And one of them is about contact. And I do think we are headed into shocking, specifically 2027 and beyond, shocking aspects of reality that you couldn't have conceived in 2010. That would be like no fucking way, science fiction type shit. Presently, it looks like that's probably going to come in the form of robots and AI or whatever. It's not off the table for something like integration with like interdimensional beings. But I don't know how that's beneficial to the raising of the consciousness of humanity, especially with its current state of being extremely entrenched in us versus them, tribalist, like mind traps. Now, I think we could, over the next 3 years, as more cross a sleeping phoenix energy comes in and people start to really take agency over their own experience and their own realities, we could interact with some sort of contact in a way that is in our power. It's not that I don't think we'll never live in a reality, kind of the way he described it today. I was like, yeah, okay. I don't think that's off the table for us to meet the equivalent of humans at the same level of consciousness, but they're having a different experience or playing a different game. It's just if you introduce that into the game where we currently are, where we're so divided, but not realizing that the reason that we are all holding different perspectives is because we are designed to hold different perspectives. Like we have no live or let live, which has to be the foundation of society moving forward, or it's going to keep cannibalizing itself. I just don't know how, and even what was rubbing me the wrong way in this whatever transmission. I'm really struggling right now with podcasting. I don't think I'm quite back yet. This transmission was cool in some ways, but the way that he talks about, well, basically now that you've voted, it's also tough because he speaks in alien language and it's all fucking metaphor. So I understand it's up for interpretation, but basically you're going to have contact either way. It's just going to happen different. It's already inevitable. It's already going to happen somewhere 2026, 2027. Part of me is like, man, I hope you are legit for your sake. Otherwise, this is going to be really interesting in 2027. You know, I hope you sold enough of those crystals. I'm not saying I think he's a scammer. I don't. But then he's like, but we have to have meetings now. I'm paraphrasing, and I'm really kind of, like I said, I'm really struggling. I quit drinking coffee, so I'm at a caffeine deficit still. But I'm going to paraphrase, and maybe I interpreted it wrong. But basically, like, since you all voted for the male, we're going to have some extra meetings to discuss contact. And I'm just like, I do get that reality is a series of choices. I do get that people jump timelines every single time they make a choice. I do get this as someone who does tarot readings or whatever. I do get that, like, the energy I'm reading is a current trajectory. You can change your mind and take a different path anytime. I get all of that. It activates my PDA when he talks about the contact like it's our bosses showing up.
Yeah.
Or whatever, or that's like a carrot being dangled in any way. And that might just be my shit. And my honest take is that he's actually talking about a level of awakening where you realize that there is no separation between us and every other civilization, because we can talk to everything in the ether. And that what he's talking about is by 26, 27, so many people will be embodied and in their own power, that and awake to the fact that they can have contact at any point, that his words will make sense in a different context.
Yeah. That's what I keep wanting to believe with it. Even when I get pinged and I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel real. It's just there's so much interpretation there with what he says. It's like so cryptic. And you know, I think there's also, though, this like way of thinking is what has gotten people in trouble in the past with like abusive cult type stuff, is like, oh, you know, he's saying essentially this was a test. And the way we said it, you know, here's how some of you interpreted it wrong. Here's how some of you interpret it this way. It's your choice. And that all makes sense. But then you realize you could get away with that forever. It's like, oh, that was just a test. I was poking you in the butt. And it's like just a test to see if it could get intense. And so but I'm trying to find that balance, and it feels like there's so much cryptic stuff in both of these messages that I still don't know. I don't know really exactly how I feel overall. It's confusing. I don't know. The contact thing is my biggest thing, though. And if he's talking about it like contact's inevitable, it depends on whoever's in power, which would also correlate with what the collective all agreed to vote that person in. Like, that's where their energy's at. So if you have contact, it's going to go with that energy, which means right now we're so damn divided trying to fit everything into one box. If there was contact, it would be crazy, you know, like.
Yeah, I guess they mean like we're going to collectively learn different lessons on our way to the way that I think disempowered people are taking it is that contact is going to come through the leadership of the pro wrestlers that we have taking up all of our time and energy.
I'm so sketched about
that. It has created such a like super, that's my bias, I guess. Like, it has created such a massive, now I'm running everything you say through 500 filters.
Yeah.
But to be honest, like I said before, I just ignored most of the contact stuff because I'm just like, yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I guess, you know, I've been of the belief that if aliens come in through the government, it's not real.
Yeah, I mean, 100%.
And even if aliens show up and it seems like it's not through the government, everything on the fucking internet is bullshit right now. So I don't know. I think if I'm being honest, it doesn't
unpack the time travel elements of all of this that I feel like is such an interesting aspect of the alien abduction contact phenomena, is like how much of it is what we call alien, which just is a being from some other dimension, and how much of it is
Time traveling humans
that like not long ago got control of tech that makes time go away and they can pop out. And what are they doing now with that? You know, how much of this is that? It would be interesting to hear him talk about that.
The ocean is a place of time traveling. Like, I feel like the ocean is portals to time travel in. And I've been saying for years that aliens are in the sea. And so it's weird that the government is saying that now. I feel like aliens are all around us. I think aliens have been around. Like, I think the ocean is a place where people time travel, like where ships get lost at sea, you know? The air, too, doesn't feel totally real. Like, I think in the air we have portals. But I feel like, yes, the aliens have been surrounding us. Like, have you seen an octopus?
Yeah, totally. And there's all those theories of those things are like biology scientists like of the earth all agree that thing is foreign from here, you know?
And just the program of the Matrix, I think, has us convinced, being human, like they push so many rules into us daily about what it means to be a human and how the human body functions and the human psyche functions. And we hear these rules, so we like continue to tell ourselves the rules. And that's where our imagination goes, is like these rules. And imagination creates reality. And Jessa's talking about like the energy of corruption and corruption sort of being exposed. And as the corruption is more exposed, the rules just will organically start breaking off and the laws will start breaking off, or we'll see how ridiculous the laws are. And as the laws and rules break, so does the restriction on our human form and our human psyche. And I think every time we sort of break a law or break a rule in society, we access more of our own personal powers and superpowers. And I feel like that's where our bodies will like really lean in more to telepathic communication, levitation, time travel, and this excitement about this alien somewhere else saving us will just become less and less relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think we are going to see like so much amazing shit and so much sci-fi level alternate realities. Like, I think those are all available as the next timeline. I think that's where we're going. I mean, I think some people are going to choose something much more of a bummer than that. I do believe we are splitting into completely different realities. And right now you are choosing the narratives that are going to determine what reality you're going into. So ask yourself what narratives you're indulging in all day.
There was a, I don't know if you saw it on, I guess I saw it on X, but there was like Fox News was filming down in New York or somewhere the other day. They were like doing a weather shot or something. It's really, really high up on a bridge overlooking like, looks like it's the Hudson and then a huge city. And they accidentally caught like some small little UFO kind of thing that just like zooms. You see it in the distance. It comes towards the camera and goes right by the camera. And it, you know, then it was like trending everywhere because like Fox accidentally caught this and like nobody's saying anything. But it was so weird because when you see it on like a legit, when I saw the clip, it's like on a legit news station thing. And for a moment, I just like imagined, I was like, oh, that's just a normal shot. And there goes somebody in their UFO. They're just heading to Andromeda or whatever. They're heading somewhere. It actually seemed so tangible. Like it wasn't far.
Yeah.
And then I just went the idea of like, it really does break a huge aspect of your perception of life. If you can consider that like, it is possible right now, or like, what if tomorrow they were like, we've got 0 point energy. You can get in a UFO and go anywhere, like hop in. How much that changes everything, your paradigm, you know, because with that comes like, oh, you move outside of time.
Yeah.
Now, how do you look at your life when there is no time? How do you look at your life when you can go to a whole nother world and experience other beings? It just opens everything up. That I feel like that's so hard to do if you're an unbalanced, unhealthy person that's obsessed with the duality nature of everything. Like, I got to pick a side. If you're given that freedom and you move into that paradigm, it's like, it's just such a, what do they call it? Black pill. Like, it breaks everything, you know? And that's why I think there is so much desire to keep the lid on it. And, or as Bashar, sometimes it feels like they're bridling when to do it, when enough people are at that place of being able to accept those crazy truths and not fall apart.
So that part resonates with me, because the issue I have, because as far as it being fantastical, that part resonates with being beneficial to the human evolution. Also, many of us are bored as fuck. And so everything that there was to be done in this kind of mundane material reality has been done. And it does feel like the next logical conclusion is something that would have previously been considered supernatural or whatever. And I've known that in my lifetime, I would experience these kind of fantastical whatever. So that part is not what makes it off the table for me. What makes it off the table for me is most of humanity is still of the belief that an authority structure that is rotten, both sides, rotten to the core, corrupt, that they get to decide your fate.
Yeah.
And as long as you believe that, that means you still are in a completely disempowered state, that you're not even asking the question of, how can I do this for myself? I don't like what this person says, so I'm going to fucking do whatever I want. Like, that's the point that the collective has to get to, because this is a power structure that you talk about. The U.S. government has existed for a couple hundred years, and people are treating it like it's a fucking God of your life and undeniable truth of the human experience. It's like, no, it's just some shit some people made up. You can just opt out. You can energetically opt out. And I get that you think you can't, and that's because you've been tricked into thinking that there's a good team and a bad team.
Yeah.
My homework assignment for anyone that's interested, just look at all of it as the revelation of corruption. Just look at everything through that lens. Put down your tribalism for 5 minutes and just imagine that they're both the same thing, that they parade your social issues out for you so that you will grease the wheels so they can, you know, at most innocent, further corporate interests, at most maleficent, so that they can harvest your energy. Okay. So one side has all the best intentions, but it just happens to be split 50-50. Like, everything just happens to be split just 50-50. Just enough that they can never quite do the thing that you need them to do. It just is so coincidentally that they would have been able to do it, but the other team, who doesn't have your best interest, and I'm not going to say which team is which because it's both the same shit. So all we were actually able to get done during this session of Congress is further the corporate interests. Actually, sorry, we weren't able to do anything about the social issues that you hold near and dear because the thing is split down the middle. It's just always 49-51. It's always 49.5, 49.5. I don't even think that was that. Anyway, I'm swimming upstream here. So long as people are still swept up in this theater of disempowerment, believing that your power is in the hands of just absolute raw, unmitigated corruption, just an entity of corruption, then of course, no, I don't think that aliens can come here and have it turn into anything other than they are a deity or they are the enemy. Because that's literally the only two boxes that anybody can put anything in thus far. Shit, my butt is sending pictures to people. Okay. But, all that said, lost it. God damn, this is so hard.
No, you're doing so good.
Oh, there's notes over here that I want to talk about. Okay, we watched another side note because I think it's relevant. We watched a documentary on Netflix the other day called
By Now.
By Now. And it talks about the conspiracy of shopping and how we're all kind of conditioned into consumerism, which is across a planning thing, and we'll kind of naturally move out of that. But it just goes through all the different ways in which the corporations have created things like planned obsolescence, which is where your iPhone breaks every 2 years, so you're forced to buy another one, where you have a printer, it breaks every 2 years, even though you only used it 5 times. How you are tricked into buying things, the dysregulation, whatever. And the thing that drives me insane about the cross-planning energy and the culture that is created around it is the basic premise of this movie is there aren't rules against it, so they do it. And we are so conditioned to external authority that you have people who are suffering under this thing because they are following the rules. Like, you hear that a lot from millennials. I did everything I was supposed to do, and look what it got me. And to me, I'm like, yeah, the lesson is stop doing that. You know what I mean? Stop doing that. When they were telling everyone to go to college, I was like, you're being scammed. Like, that's a sales pitch, and you're not allowed to file bankruptcy on that. And what the fuck are you going to do with six figures in debt, you know? But I don't listen to authority. So I don't need a fucking sticker for having done what you told me to do. I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to do it if it makes sense to me. And that's it. And what the corporations are doing and the billionaires are doing is they are manipulating the rules, and then they are doing everything that they can possibly get away with. And this is what happens when you build a society on collective fucking rules. Then the name of the game for everybody is, what can I get away with? It's the same thing that drives me nuts about, like, when you have small children and car seats. People determine what kind of car seat they're putting their kid in, or whether or not they're forward facing or rear facing, according to what the law is, rather than understanding cars, which are the second leading killer of kids, I believe. And I think I've already gone on this rant in cars. It's in the top 3, 4. Are the most dangerous thing you do with your kid on a regular basis. G-force is wild, and it works different on children's bodies than adult bodies. It's a wild thing to not educate yourself on and to just go along with whatever the system is telling you to do, because the system is telling you the absolute fucking bare minimum. But a lot of time the laws are based on corporate fucking interest. The thing is captured. It's hijacked. I don't know if it was ever good, but it's not fucking good. It's rotten to the goddamn core. Stop fighting with your fellow man, for the love of fucking Christ. You are hypnotized and propagandized by fucking corporations. Ow. Sit down, have conversations with people that you fucking know, listen to the entire podcast that you're fucking being radicalized by sound bites and headlines. For fuck's sake. Sorry, I've had this on my mind for like 2 straight weeks. That's probably why I had brain fog.
Unclog it.
I wish everyone could see Jessa right now, because she's wiggling this hand scratcher,
It's a back
but it looks
scratcher.
like a fairy wand, and she's putting it very high up while speaking.
Cat at your feet.
I really need to get that out of my system.
Keep going.
This thing is rotten. The system is rotten. Externalized authority. We are being given the opportunity to see with real eyes that you have to take your own personal power back, and you have to stop looking for someone to take it. Stop giving it away. Hold it for yourself. If you feel like someone's taking your rights away, you ask the question, how do I do it anyway? And then you're going to come up with a bunch of like, well, no, how do I do it anyway? As someone who did drugs for years, the drugs were not legal. Okay? Just a little life hack for you. The drugs were not legal. And large groups of us managed to get them anytime we wanted them, to do lots of them and get away with it. That's how the collective needs to start to think, because the thing is rotten, and you don't have a team in it. You don't have a fucking team in it. Sorry. And it's a trick to get you to not come together in solidarity and go like, hey, I don't necessarily resonate with, the way you choose to move through the world, but I also don't think I need to legislate my worldview onto you.
following rules doesn't make you good either.
No,
that's what
that's
the
opposite.
hardest programming I think for a lot of people to get out of is that, I mean, it was for me. It's like when you are even small rules and you're like kind of going outside of it, there's this guilt all of a sudden that kind of is programmed in to be like, oh, I'm a bad person. And then on the flip side, a lot of people will not question any rule because they just go, oh, I have to be good in this life, and so follow rules. And so they will not critically think about anything because they assume following rules is good. And that's why that thing is so, it's like hijackable, the obsession with following a rule and equating that with good.
It's very cross the planning, and I think that's why it drives me nuts. But everyone's answers, like people fighting over the government shit right now is driving people quibbling over, I don't even know if that's a word, over regulations. And it's like, hey, listen, here's what's happening. The world is burning because we are trying to address greed overgrowth with rules. And we're not stopping for a second and going, what is the premise? The premise of life has become enforcing rules or seeing how much you can get away with outside of the rules. Like, we are so programmed with this fetty ass fucking idea. And I can't believe how cop-like everyone has gotten. Everyone's solution is like cheering for the justice system getting their enemies. And it's like, you're feeding into the same fucking weird war god entity that's feeding off of this shit. And I'm just like, I feel like a crazy person. Once again, this has been like my whole life, watching people just lost in this kind of spiritual, conscious people lost in this fucking matrix of propaganda on all sides. It's not a side thing. It's like the division. And I'm not someone who's like, everyone should get along with each other, but it is the paranoia aspect of the division, the tribalism. I feel like we are just seeing the absolute shadow of all the cross the planning. Like the cross the planning had positives, right? But we're just seeing the shadow of tribalism, the shadow of, I actually want to do like a TikTok asking this question. If you are politically invested, you identify as a Republican or a Democrat, and you're the kind of person that then watches what the other team does when they get to be in charge and criticizes it, do you have a voice in your head that says, well, what, like, so let's say you're like on the right and you're a Republican, you're super into Trump, and then Biden does something. Do you ask yourself before you speak about it, what would I do if Trump did this? Or vice versa, if Trump's cabinet is doing something? Because I never see that level of like measured consciousness in these conversations. There's so much fucking hypocrisy where it's like, you didn't give a shit. And I don't care about any of the things because I do think this is theater. Like, I'm fired up about it right now because I've been sitting without, I've been sitting for 2 weeks, like stuck watching TikTok all day, revving at the starting line to want to talk about this. I wasn't planning on talking about it in this episode, but these are the things that we are being given to realize about ourselves. Now, you can only go so far in consciousness within tribalism, as far as I'm concerned. If you're so identified with a red team, blue team, that you can't objectively go, would I feel different if this was Biden? Then you've hit a ceiling of consciousness and you actually can't go further because your identity as being part of a team and being so invested, and this is not spiritual bypassing. I don't believe that spiritual bypassing is every time someone doesn't get lost in your matrix with you. Spiritual bypassing is choosing to be like positive vibes only. I'm definitely not positive vibes only. But I think that insisting that the world capitulate to your worldview in order to be good is its own form of toxic positivity. So all of that, like through that lens, all of that, there's no fucking way that we are ready currently. I feel ready, but there's no fucking way that the collective currently, now this could change drastically because the collective is evolving at a rapid pace, but collectively could take in the information of aliens or time travel without it getting absolutely fucking corrupted and without it being hijacked by the fucking powers that be, because people won't stop handing their power over to them, no matter how corrupt they all prove themselves to be. The collective wants a fucking mommy and a daddy so goddamn bad. They want a savior so goddamn bad.
And so much of our identity is around that energy of mommy and daddy. Like the energy of our identity being connected to, well, I'm a person who follows the rules. That person over there doesn't follow the rules, but I do. And I may have broken a few rules in my day. And I have some privilege in looking wildly innocent and sounding wildly innocent. And I may or may not break rules more on a consistent basis these days as a form of activism. I think the most effective form of activism is law breaking, but
I agree.
And one thing I realized in that is the authority isn't even who I have to look out for in these scenarios. It's the people with the identity that they are good because they are following the rules.
Yes.
And those people are the fucking cops of our culture, and they watch you like a hawk. And you're just in this environment with them, but I don't have to worry about the external hired paid authority who are technically like who could get me in trouble. I have to worry about the people who identify that they're better than me. Oh, I really just want to tell the truth of what I did. Don't. Yeah, okay. But I won't. But one thing I learned is I can shut off my energy, my ability to be perceived, and I can turn on my ability to be perceived. And the witches talk about this a lot with like glam magic or glam ritual. It can get really silly. But there is this thing you can do internally that you can turn this frequency on where people can perceive you. And if I turn it off, the do-gooders, the people with this identity can't perceive that I'm doing something bad. But I may have broken a law once where this woman was like, she did it. It was her. And like, no one else would even look at me. They were like, okay, maybe. I just remember hearing like, no, I can't tell too much.
Yeah, no, don't. They could be listening. That kind of person could be listening to the podcast.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what I was saying. I'm just saying you can turn it on and off. And like, it's scary and it's easy to fall into. Like, I've definitely fallen into like wanting to do good and wanting to be seen as good, because growing up with my family, growing up with abuse, there's just like a lot of messagings that I'm bad. So I looked externally of like what the rules are and how I could like show up to them so big and ace everything.
I've definitely I've definitely experienced that, and I definitely have spent the last few years wrestling with the fear of being seen as bad or whatever. But that's more with the collective, it's with my fellow humans. I don't understand the indoctrination because they never successfully indoctrinated me. I didn't get enough fluoride or something as a kid. I just had too much ADHD for the indoctrination. I'm not sure. Too many head injuries. I don't understand the handing over your power to the authority. I don't understand how we are allegedly anti-justice system, but then cheering for justice system to take down your enemies. Like that's such an obvious fucking trick. And I understand that I'm maybe more anarchist than everyone else, but it's so obvious to me when the system wants to further take something from you, they get you to consent by saying, well, we need to take it from the other side. It's just so, from a zoomed out perspective, it's so fucking obvious. And it's so obvious that they've convinced one side these wackadoodle things about that side, and then vice versa. And then you get them to never talk to each other. And you get them to never talk to each other with ideas like don't platform them or you know, now they've got some idea that if they perceive or stop or listen, that they are somehow getting it on them and that they are bad. And it's cuckoo bananas to watch from the outside, because the billionaires who you all allegedly don't like just get more and more billionary, and they're getting more billionary because you're not fucking listening to each other. You're not having conversations with each other because you think you're so fucking morally righteous, and you're being propagandized. Like the level of hypnosis. I want to do like a group fucking dehypnotization thing. Anyway, I'm going to delete most of this.
No,
please
great.
don't. Please don't.
Anyways, about Bashar.
But following rules for
gotta
rules'
pee real quick. Keep going.
sake is like wild. Like my boyfriend and I were on a plane, and I convinced him that we should be the last on the plane, and it caused a little chaos, like I'm known to do sometimes. And he ended up leaving his backpack in the lounge. Whatever, you're not supposed to leave your backpack. You know, they like take it to the police or whatever.
Yeah, in the lounge.
Or what is it called before you board?
Oh, like at the gate.
At the gate.
Okay.
And the stewardess was like, you can go get your backpack. We were the last on the plane though. She's like, just run out and go grab it fast. And the guy guarding the gate was like, no, you can't, because it's the rule. He's like, well, the stewardess said I could, and it's right there. And he's like, but you can't. The rule. And they were just having this like huge argument about this big rule, till like I convinced another woman to go get him and walk him through to grab his backpack. But I just see some of us as like clenching and gripping the rules so hard right now. And it's our sense of like our own personal authority too. Like I had to follow it, so don't you? Fairness is a part of rules.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, a lot of people talk about having an internal sense of justice or whatever. It's like a neurodivergent trait.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what my own hyperinflated sense of justice is what drives me nuts about stuff like this, because it feels very unjust to me. It feels very unfair. But a lot of people will be like, I just have a heightened sense of justice, but then their justice only is extended to people that they consider worthy, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
But a lot of people's sense of justice is synonymous with rules. And the rules are handed down to you by people who are fleecing you for the love of fuck.
Yeah.
And so they need to be questioned. Every single rule needs to be questioned. And even in some ways, the bureaucratic aspects, like we have a 2024, maybe it's a 2023 car. We've owned it a year. We live in a state where you have to get it fucking new plates or new tags every single year. And I found out when I tried to renew them late the other day that you have to take it to get inspected. What the fuck do I possibly need an inspection on a brand new car for? This is corruption. This is just, we got to pay property tax on this car and our house and income tax and sales tax. It's like state tax, federal tax. You are being fleeced. And the first step to changing that is to recognize that you are being fleeced at every fucking turn, and start to ask yourself, even if you don't do it, even if you don't break the rules, I'm not telling anyone to break the law, obviously, this is on YouTube, but just question and stop equating rules with virtue. And then maybe start to, I don't know, just as a practice, spend 1 week, if you are very invested in the us versus them, spend 1 week just, okay, I'm going to look at everything from the perspective of they're all the same thing and they are all corrupted, bought by corporate interests, using my passionate social issues to get us to fund, these corporate interests. Just look at it from that perspective, that there aren't good guys and bad guys. You've got good cop and bad cop. That one is just being like, oh man, I'll save the day. And then, oh man, just couldn't save the day because it was just half of a thing, 50-50,
I just love what you said about justice and rules not being the same thing, but how people correlate that as the exact same thing. What do you feel about the energy of justice?
I don't know. I didn't hear part of that conversation. I think, in general, I think it's actually like the more the more you study this kind of the spiritual world of like where we're going, this other place of consciousness that you can get into to look at the world, the justice thing like doesn't always correlate and go through that to me. Like you can't, everybody gets their own, it's like karma or something. Like the universe will just kind of iron those things out. I think when we become obsessed and trying to like make sure people are punished for their wrongdoings, you get into that vicious cycle of like, you never get out of it when you're focused on giving everybody their due. So to me, it's a distraction, I think, in my own life. Like I get when there's times where if somebody's wronged me, I can get into a place where I'm like, well, I hope you get shown that, or they'll be like sick the next week. I'm like, see, it's fucking coming after you. You know, it's, the justice system has arisen. But yeah, I think it's something that because of that loop, that vicious loop cycle, it's something that's obviously you can hijack that. If you get people to be obsessed with that, like you can hijack their energy infinitely because it loops forever.
And there's just this energy with laws that it means fairness and it means we're all equal.
We're so propagandized to believe that this thing, and it's that like, the rules.
Yeah. And we have to be equal and you have to follow it because I had to follow it. And this is fair and fair and fair. And like, what is fair? And
yeah, it's weird. There's like, yeah.
The bureaucracy is what I was thinking about. What happened in the mountains here in North Carolina was a unspeakable, unprecedented flood that had many more casualties than you're hearing about on the news, and they're still finding bodies. Immediately afterwards, there were, and this might be controversial to some, there were civilians from those mountains trying to fly in with their helicopters to help people. And there were, for the first couple days, I know a lot of people who live up there, there were locals going around with chainsaws and getting people. There's someone in this community who was 9 months pregnant, and it was locals, not authorities, locals came through and cut down all the trees that were blocking their driveway, cut them up into pieces, whatever. Now, the people who live in the Appalachian Mountains are very capable people. They're extremely capable people. Now, if this happened in like, I don't know, fucking downtown Portland, this would be something different, right? But when you're talking about mountain people, like these people work with their hands. They are extremely capable people. Well, FEMA comes in, and that's a federal management company. So this is bureaucracy to the nth degree. And there are places where I'm sure they come in that, you know, and I'm not someone who thinks FEMA is evil or anything like that, but the reality is this is extraordinary circumstances and we need to take extraordinary measures. And there are capable people. If you own a fucking helicopter, I'm going to trust that you can go in and get people. And the reality is, if someone doesn't go in and get them right now, they might not be alive tomorrow. But then there was a bunch of shit about the conflict between them being told that they couldn't by local whatever. And there was a lot of fights between the locals and the base of it was the rules. And so then I saw people defending FEMA saying, well, you just can't have any Joe Schmo going in there because they're getting in the way. And then you have locals saying, literally, we've been left here for days and days and days and days with nothing. All we have is the fucking locals. And I think we're reaching the point of the cross of planning where the bureaucracy is slowing everything down, and it's going to collapse because there's going to be more natural disasters than FEMA's able to get to. And we are going to realize that what we have at the end of the day is each other and our own self-sufficiency, to be honest. But your local communities are going to start to mean more and more and more. And you're going to find people like migrating to living collectively with people they actually really resonate with.
When you talked about the energy of tribalism with like human design and the end of tribalism moving into an age of individuality, at first that was a little triggering for me because like what I was hearing, which wasn't true, was we're not going to be there for each other.
Right.
But then like sitting with it and talking to you more, like what I hear is like the energy of tribalism has a lot to do with the energy of authority. And the energy of like what's best for this bigger clump of people, this bigger tribe. And in that, we crush the individual.
Yes.
And our country is huge and too large. And we're constantly not looking or caring for the individuals. And what I hear about Asheville is there were individuals caring for their fellow individuals, their fellow neighbors. And the tribe, the bigger tribalism system, couldn't access them the way individuals could access them. And through being in an individual age is how we can actually be there for each other more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And we are at the end of a massive tribalistic 400 years, right? Collective and tribal. So we are seeing the parts of it that are like corrupted. But it's the same thing like when you work for a restaurant that is corporately owned. All of the decisions that are made for your restaurant are made by some dudes in a fucking boardroom that don't give two fucks about you and they never worked on the floor a day in their lives. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like when there is a local catastrophe, especially in an environment like up in the mountains, to dismiss the individuals, the locals, the very capable people. We're in unprecedented times and we can't keep living according to homogenized rules. It's going to get us killed. Yeah. It's going to get people hurt. There is no rule book for the reality that we're going into. And the homogenized, standardized, boil down to this or that thing just simply isn't going to work. We are 330 million individual. I thought there was billion on the last episode. 330 million individuals.
In the States.
In the States. And that is what is coming into focus outside of tribalism and starting to see yourself as something other than this or that, or from this political affiliation or this religion or whatever.
Because those are rules, right? Like the religion gives you rules. The affiliation gives you rules. And we lose our identity through abiding the rules of other.
Yeah. The rules, I would follow most rules if they make sense to me and they're not in my way. But if you give me a rule that doesn't make sense to me and it's in my way, I'm just simply not going to do it. Because I'm like, I have felt this way my entire life. Who the fuck are you to tell me what to do? And then if you just look at it just a little bit deeper, it's like most of these rules are so that someone else can benefit. So that our government officials can get paybacks from corporations who can then get the regulations and the tax laws and everything written to benefit them so that they can get richer and richer and richer while your average person can't afford to buy paper towels.
Yeah.
So why the fuck would I follow those rules?
But there's been a bigger message of you're selfish if you worry about who you are.
Yes, I understand, because people are propagandized.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. And that's what I think is so interesting about this going from tribal to more individual. Just the words themselves, everybody gets triggered right away because you're so conditioned. The thing to do to be good in life is to do something for others. Even the STS thing, it's like service to others. But it doesn't, it's this profound, like, once you get through the programming of it, and I always go to nature as like the best example, the forest, is that forest thrives because the individuals are being so purely themselves that they're fed by the group. Everything feeds in, it becomes fractal. There's nothing in the forest arguing about, the tree should be more like a bug or whatever. There's just this like pure individual cohesiveness that in the end, you get served by serving others through being yourself. And that's like, it's a hard thing to understand when you're propagandized that's individualism is bad. It's selfish.
I want to take it one step further because I think we spend a lot of time on, sorry, I'm annoying right now. We spend a lot of time on like being yourself. Service to others is letting them be individuals. Ooh. It is killing the cop inside of you. It is asking yourself, why am I cheering for the justice system to go after anyone? Why am I empowering this thing that has taken away so many people's lives, to put them in a jail to do labor for free? Why am I cheering for them to go after my political enemies? Why am I conditioned that like telling on people or wishing for them to be punished rather than just natural consequences? Why do I see myself as a person who's living in a reality in which the universe brings me the consequences, natural consequences, and I experience those and learn my lessons, and then I'm a moment of time and I'm changing and evolving, but I don't, extend that compassion to people I don't agree with? Why do I want to see people punished? Why do I think that people should follow the rules, but why do I think that I get to decide what the rules are?
Revenge. What do you feel about the energy of revenge?
I think that reality is a mirror. And I think that I've definitely indulged in revenge, and everything has natural consequences. So whoever does something to me, they're going to have the natural consequences. If I then go take revenge on them, I now have to deal with the natural consequences of the revenge.
Yeah.
So, and it's when people go, yeah, karma. Oh, that person got karma because they did something to me and hurt me. And it's like, okay, well then what did you do to deserve getting hurt by them? It's like such a stupid way to look at things. And we're not here, like punishment. And I wish we would wake up out of this. Like when my 30-year-old was a small child, we still hit our kids. Like I hit this child, a small child, to punish them. Like that's how like insane the programming
in Christianity, they have a different word for spanking or hitting your kid, and you're not allowed to say spank. I shouldn't say like all of Christianity. I just heard this story of like this sect of Christianity, and they don't use the word spank or hit, but they're essentially doing this exact thing with a tool, but justifying it because like how else are your kids going to know the rules, the bounds?
Yeah, when Coco was a child, the book that was going, because I was a Christian, the book that was the predominant parenting book was James Dobson. It was about breaking the will of the child. Like your job as a parent is to break the will of the child. Now, when you think from the perspective that this realm is being dominated by Yahweh or whatever fucking weird war god that is just turning everyone into, like, we're all just expressing that energy.
What did they mean by break the will of the child?
Like that children have like strong will, which will then like really serve them in
like
life. That they have their individuality. You're robbing them of their individuality. Yeah. And we're all just like conditioned into that. So if you want to be of service to humanity, be of service to humanity in supporting people being who they are. And that means sometimes they're going to disagree with you. And that means sometimes they're going to have a different worldview than you. And that means sometimes they're not going to be the kind of person who answers your texts or coddles your feelings or whatever. Like, let people become who they are. Stop expecting people to mask. Stop expecting people to rescue you from your own internal experience. Stop expecting people to validate your version of reality. Stand in your own individuality and extend that to other people. That's a great way to be service to humanity. And then we don't all have to be cogs in a wheel.
Yeah.
The reason that everyone is expected to work 40 plus hours a week, serving into this thing that doesn't serve them back, is because that's the program of the matrix that you have lived in your entire life. You don't exist. You exist to serve the thing. And there's like healthy versions of tribalism. It just kind of doesn't matter because we're not going to live in a tribal reality. I don't believe.
I love that you're saying that service to self is just accepting another's individuality.
Service to others, yeah.
Service to others is accepting the individual.
It's a hard word to say.
Yeah.
Especially 10 times fast.
But it's in love too. Like I had this programming that love is how you see me, how you treat me, how you hold me, our beautiful experiences together. And it's like, no, love is both of you allowing the other person to be an individual, to be themselves with space around it. Oh, I'm considering, no. Oh, like that's so not fun compared to the stories we've been fed.
All right, we had to take a 24-hour break. That episode felt like swimming upstream, and the only life raft was anarchist rants. Sorry about that. Also, if I said you all, whatever. I'm just yelling at people on TikTok. Back to Bashar. I think we sometimes when we want to talk about something on the podcast, then we talk about it before the podcast. And then it's like, God damn, there's so many good things here. I wish we would have been recording. So we went straight from this recording, speaking 0 words to each other, into recording the podcast. And I was annoyed by Bashar, and then I was afraid that I was just being bitchy, so I was kind of trying to feel you guys out, but I can't talk when I'm being inauthentic. I stumble over my words, and then I think maybe we were all...
What are your true feelings about the Bashar thing?
I think that people are complicated, and that anyone we try to put this person's all good or this source is all good is going to have to reflect back whatever. So my personal take, my personal experience with it was I couldn't turn that live stream off fast enough. I was annoyed with it. Now I am, curious how I would feel about it if I watched it today. And I think different people are going to have different experiences with it. But I just don't, the original transmission rubbed me the wrong way. The explanation rubbed me the wrong way. It also left out huge pieces. Like, I don't think you should say something like, I don't think that Bashar should be talking about zoomed in, like, geopolitical anything. I don't think that that's a conversation.
That's what's weird. He typically does not.
And so then to just throw out World War III and the I feel like I have to be very careful with the words here because he seemed to use very specific words, to kind of throw that out there and then to what felt like walk it back, but not discuss, which Lacey, you said that, like not discuss the biggest part of what you said. And then also to say, you'll have contact either way. Well, that seems like it would have been a relevant piece of information for someone who didn't have a dog in the fight, because that's definitely not the impression that you gave.
Yeah.
And I'm not someone who's like, because I don't like cop shit, I'm not necessarily someone who is really rigid that you need to watch every single thing you say because you have a responsibility, because you have a platform. Because the reality is we have a responsibility in how we engage with these platforms. Like he shouldn't be made an all-knowing God that everyone defers their authority to anyway. And everyone engaged with it from whatever their own bias was, including me, which is why I don't like it, because I feel like you're encouraging people to be invested in this thing that's collapsing and is propaganda. But that's my bias. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the government really cares about us, but I didn't like the explanation at all. It felt like a bunch of word salad. I feel like I watched him stop and think multiple times, and there is just a frequency to when Bashar is being very empowering and very, like, reminds me of the aliens that I am talking to, and then there is this other thing that is literally a different frequency. It feels different, and I keep wanting to temper that by saying maybe that's my own bias, so I'm going to temper that, but I'm pretty confident that I am correct, that there is at least in the reality that I'm living in, that there is a melding here happening between Daryl and Bashar, and perhaps that's part of Daryl's journey.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest explanation to me that makes sense, is because he's openly talked about that he's slowly melding the two, and that's also why I feel like the frequency of his voice, it has started to change and drift into more of Daryl, and that maybe this is just us witnessing part of his practice in doing that, and that there was a bit of a biased take that was trying to be kind of in the middle and like be cryptic, but him missing a couple of those points, I don't know. I think, though, like I've talked about before, the one thing that has always bothered me about the Bashar stuff is how biased the contacting is, how much that creates in all of the people that follow him just such a desire to get to that contact so they can finally end the turmoil in their lives, and create that, like, all of that has never aligned with any of the the real individual journey, and it's about like save yourself. You know, there's no one that's going to save you. The contact thing has always put this extra weight on it that a lot of people are just looking for that to happen and are focused on just seeing them as somebody that's good. They're a group of beings that's going to come save us. And so the focus is to just be in pure love and light when they come. So you'll get saved, you know? And again, it's like, that's a hijackable thing.
Right.
Worship us, stay in love vibration. Just know, no matter what we look like, we're here to help. It's like programming you into anything that comes out of the sky. You're immediately wanting to say, oh, they're here to help, you know?
And for me, I was ignoring that. And we talked about this already on the other episode, but like I was ignoring the contact stuff because it's not interesting to me. And I just assume that's a riddle. Like what I found compelling about Bashar is that, first of all, the cadence that it talks in a lot of times, that's almost like Willy Wonka-ish, where it's like, good day, sir. Like that's how the aliens talk. Mm-hmm. And they're very like sarcastic and whatever. So I resonated with that, meaning like that felt true to me. And then it was constantly like directing people back to their own power, which felt good to me. And every time there were conversations about open contact, I just kind of tuned it out. And it wasn't until, because I find most conversation about aliens dreadfully boring. I don't know what it is. I just find it all so boring. I feel like everyone's trying to understand aliens through through human planning, even constructs, like American, Western material constructs. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So I find it boring. It's just so mansplaining. I don't know. And so I just don't care. It's not something I care about. And it wasn't until it got dangled as a carrot for something, because as far as I'm concerned, if we live in a world where there's open contact, we live in a world where there is no government. And I could be completely wrong, but I just can't make that make sense. Why contact would come to facilitate the extension of something that's clearly dying. That's why everyone's 80 years old in it. It's allegory for what it's on its last leg. So open contact is going to come in and extend. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So once that was dangled as a carrot for something that people are already clearly struggling to wake up out of, it's now you got me thinking, like, are you a fucking government psyop to like lead, because I don't really all that false light shit. I'm just like, I'm not that conspiratorial in my thinking, although I just screamed about corporations. I'm not that pie in the sky conspiratorial. I do believe things are a tiny little agendas, a million tiny agendas. But anyway, if I'm being truly honest, and I guess I'm trying to temper this because I'm not married to this, but if I'm being truly honest, the original thing rubbed me really the wrong way. And I think I expressed that before. This one was worse, and I felt like my bullshit meter was going off. And I just don't know if that's because I was suddenly looking at it through a critical eye, because I've been annoyed with the last message for weeks, or because I'm just like, so many people are getting captured. They're getting captured by their own greed and their own corruption. And I remember, Lacey, you having a download 2 years ago that all the idols would fall. Like, everybody who had been propped up as a spiritual leader or whatever would fall. And I thought that was really interesting back then, because I kind of instinctively like went into hiding to make sure. And it was like, you said that after I'd already kind of gone into hiding, but it felt to me very important that you don't let people put you into that role. And he's another person who I'm just like, you've let yourself be put into this pedestal, and I just don't think the energy is going to support that. I think power corrupts. So I am highly skeptical of Bashar right now. That doesn't mean, the reason I'm tempering that so much is because I do think the things that Bashar has said about self-empowerment still stands as really valuable things. But this whole thing, I don't like it. And I'm open to having my mind changed, but I don't like it, if I'm being honest. And I was trying to dance around that yesterday for some reason.
Yeah. I think I feel the same way. I think we can have both. Like, he can say a lot of really great things that are useful, and I've learned a lot from things he said, and I've tried them, and they have helped. But yeah, at some point, things might not resonate anymore, or whether it's getting hijacked and distorted now. But I feel the same way. There was just I was trying my best to read into that first message cryptically and be like, okay, no, maybe there's something real subtle here I'm not picking up on. But then seeing this response to it again, I'm like, there's a lot of weird shit in this, and I don't know. So I think it's maybe a good little test, and for people to remember that there's not one person that's gonna like always nail it, and so there's really no one to always just follow as the ultimate truth, and this is just an example of that.
There could also be trickster energy here, just like pushing people back into their own authority because he has allowed himself to be pedestalized.
And that's like more where I was at, like depth wise, like what is the trickster element? What is this like actually trying to achieve that is not about the obvious, And so that like kind of actually leads to the thing that I was trying to talk about yesterday, that in general, I think is just, I guess, is my own perception of what contact is, or what this idea of beings graduating into a whole different dimension of experience and possibilities. And so I'm just going to try to articulate, because it's just an interesting way to think about it. I think there's a lot of different topics to talk around how this would happen. But my feeling of it is that there is like all of this stuff has obviously like trickster qualities to it, and being that it's an energy, like a trickster energy is not doing something good or bad. It's usually doing what's most benefit for growth, like whatever is going to catalyze evolution and growth, which can be good and bad, right? So it's like it's like paradoxical. And so whatever this like contact event that would be on a more public scale, something that would be affecting like a giant group of people's perceptions of the paradigms that they live in, if it's from another dimension, like a higher conscious dimension, which we're calling fourth density. So we're in third density and we're trying to graduate to fourth density. It seems like contact is going to be at some point like a benchmark, something that we have to go through, have everyone's paradigms get popped and start to consider this other way of being, which would be fourth density, which would come with, okay, there are more beings in this cosmos than we thought. There's technology we never could have imagined that is being used for that. And also the just beings in general in fourth density, the way that they connect and exchange energy with others is like a whole different platform, a whole different like way that occurs, where it obviously seems to be like telepathy. A lot of like psi abilities are involved. But one of the most common things that you hear about with a lot of this paranormal experiences people have, or abductions, is what I'm like calling this like plug and play kind of mechanism, where whoever the contactee, like the individual that's being contacted, whatever their psyche is at, like however they see the world, is going to be projected onto this experience. And this fourth density entity is going to play whatever character or be whatever that person's consciousness is projecting. And so if there was a massive contact event, whatever the majority of the people that experience it, like whatever they are projecting onto it is what will be. And that's why I think that they're at some level there's like, they're trying to bridle when this would happen, because if everybody's still in their subconscious and does not have control of their own reality, then either chaos is going to ensue because the subconscious is going to respond to that event and not understand it, or there would be intention for the beings, the contact, the whatever, the aliens or whatever, to take advantage of that projection and, create another idol worship or some kind of enslavement. So I don't know if this is making sense, but...
So you're saying that when the aliens show up, are you saying this is in third density and fourth density, we will project, which projecting, I think we are mostly talking about usually as... Like, I think we use projection as like an insult.
Yeah.
But projection is literally like, if I experience the alien as a deity, that loads in the matrix.
Yes.
Okay. That does that in third density and fourth density?
Well, what I'm thinking that happens, it happens regularly in third density with other third density beings, but it's very slow. Because there's a lot of ways we connect. And so you can explain yourself. You can talk in our language. And there's all these cues we pick up that create understanding in what's going on. But when you, like, I think in third density, when you have a paranormal experience and you see a Mothman or something, it's actually just an energy that's capable of switching into whatever it wants or you want very quickly. And so when you have that experience, it's a connection to your psyche and your conscious awareness and all the narratives and stories, experience that you've ever had to try to fit in and understand what this is. It morphs to whatever fits your understanding to have an interaction. And so there's this plug and play thing, like where it's plugged into your consciousness. And now whatever you project, whatever fears you have or desires you have, it's going to be that. And so if two beings are in fourth density and they're in control of their reality and they interact, I think that's something that's like maybe outside of our awareness of like what that would look like, but it's probably something much more like you're just connecting to the source energy of it, and then you commune together and kind of you're aware that that's going on, so you experience each other more deeply. And the surface level of it is kind of a display that is like played with in some way. Does that make sense?
Yes, kind of. I know we can't get like a solid description of what fourth density is, but my understanding, and I'm just basing this on what I've noticed the kind of collective evolution is that in third density, we are largely experiencing unconscious projections. So the vast majority of things we're experiencing are stories, programs, subconscious motivations, projected things. So like, I don't like her because she's too loud because I'm rejecting the part of me that's too loud. And I'm assuming fourth density is like awareness. And so we are aware that however I'm interacting with this alien is a decision that I'm making to interact with the alien, and it's going to load accordingly, where in the third density, I'm unconscious and I don't know that I'm looking for a mommy. And so the alien's going to show up as a mommy because I don't know that. Because that's something I've noticed in the last 5 years. The evolution that many of us have experienced is like, I have very little lasting subconscious motivations now, I'm finding. Like, that's what's really shifted, especially on the other side of nervous system work, is the ability to hear my own subconscious desires to experience certain things. Right?
Yeah. And that, like, I feel like once you have, I mean, I think a lot of people experience this, once you have gotten rid of a lot of those subconscious motivations and you've figured out like what has been driving you, you do get to a place where, for me, I felt like aimless. I felt a little like meaningless in life. Bored. And like, what do I actually want? Like, I think I was going after things that I wanted in life for so long based on this like subconscious thing that was like running from something, trying to get seen because I was never seen, trying to like deal with all of this childhood stuff, whether that's from parents or culture. And so once you start to clean that slate, you have this like, what is motivating me in life? And I think that's where a lot of us are, like, a lot of people just don't know what they want. If you didn't have to do the 9-to-5 job, if you didn't have to do all of these things, like, what would you do with your time? And I think that's part of like what is a little bit, it's either like an initiatory process or something that like to get into fourth density, being plugged into like a reality that is immediate manifestation and things come right away. Like you do need to have some direction and know what you want, because you're going to immediately start experiencing whatever your deep part of your energy is like doing, you know? And so I think that's why like a lot of people do have gnarly experiences with some a paranormal event or like a contact situation with another being, because their subconscious is so riddled with whatever that when that thing shows up, it's scary and crazy because it's reflecting what's going on inside.
Right. Or they have like just, and you know, I'm saying this is something that's relatively new for me. So it's not like, well, we've arrived to fourth density, but there have been significant changes, and I've noticed in our friends and people I do sessions with that this is becoming kind of a normal experience where all that fucking trauma work and shit has led to, oh, I have this story that just plays on a loop and I project it onto everyone I meet. And so every friend that would come into my life would be treacherous. Every, you know, partner I would get would be a narcissist, like victim, villain, savior. And I think that a lot of what is happening with the government stuff and everyone's like investment in that is you're seeing everyone's kind of subconscious stories. It's like there is an addiction, and I have experienced like an addiction to certain types of conflict. I have experienced an addiction to victim, villain, savior most of my life. And I think you can see that on whether people want to be the victim or they want to be the savior, or they're looking for the villain or they're looking for the savior, right? And so if I'm taking the contact stuff at face value, which it's not off the table for me, but if I'm taking the contact stuff at face value and he's saying, and he keeps talking about, you guys are almost ready, you're almost ready, we could very well, at the rate that things are going, and I believe because we're about to see a massive acceleration in consciousness next year, we could very well be at critical mass of people. I think we're already at critical mass of people in an awakening process, but we could be at a critical mass of people capable of like subconscious awareness, like capable of not projecting a story, like holding some sort of neutrality, or at least an awareness of your bias. Because not to say I don't have biases. I think this whole thing is about my bias of like being an anarchist, right? So, but I am like able to now, very recently in the last couple of years, sit in that and then also slide over from this perspective and then also slide over from this perspective, have the experience with kind of this open-handed, I'm not married to this.
Yeah, it's like being extremely open-minded, I think, is the caveat to it. Because it's okay to have bias. It's okay because you need direction. You need, like, if I had to imagine a utopia, like, what does that look like? But then I'm extremely open-minded to experience something and respond in a new way because I see that it might be better, you know, or whatever. So it's like you're in control of, you realize the subconscious motivations. You've cleaned all that out. You're operating mostly from an aware conscious state. Then that seems to be something that's much more compatible to move in and transition into a fourth density reality where, like, the paradigm is so far beyond what this limited reality is that, like, you can't just have a bunch of people that are like running out of through their subconscious, getting access to like traveling the cosmos and interacting with a bunch of other beings that are on like a whole different level. It would be chaos, you know?
Absolutely. And that's what I've always felt. And that's why service to self, service to others has always been kind of confusing to me, because I believe that the reason that the vast majority of the work you have to do in awakening is getting to know yourself is because the higher knowledge that does give you a lot more power is encrypted in you becoming a healthier and healthier person, because otherwise you will do harm.
Yeah.
You know, if you would have handed me the ability to manifest that I have now when I was still a chaos demon, like very manipulative, trying to get my needs met through, manipulation and wanting to control other people's perception of me and whatever. Like I gained those abilities in equal measure to becoming a healthier person that doesn't infringe my reality or doesn't dominate other people. It's the same thing where I think like the worst spell you can do is a love spell. Like the worst use of magic is to try to force someone else into, like, to override someone's free will for your own emotional gain, And
I think there's just in our own lives, like there's so many times where I've maybe hurt somebody, but in the moment when it was going on, I thought I was doing the best thing I could do. I thought I was being compassionate, but because I was lacking the awareness of a bigger picture, I did things that then hurt people. And I can look back now and go, oh, now I know though more, and like I wouldn't do those things. But in any given moment, you could have like great intentions and still be hurting someone because you're not aware, like you're actually everything's running through your subconscious and you don't have control over that. So what you think is good right now actually might be hurting someone. So I think that's like, it's not even to say it's like, I think being in the subconscious and people hurt each other, it's not because they're bad.
They think they're the victim, which is the issue with believing yourself to be the victim.
Right.
Is that the worst things I've ever done in my entire life was when I believed I was the victim.
You're the victim. Yeah. So it seems to me like with the contact stuff, I'm highly skeptical of it, to be honest, on any mass scale, without it being a psyop of some sort. That's been, there's a lot of theories now, like every religion we've had, and a lot of things that have happened in the past when civilizations have excelled so quickly and started to be able to do agriculture and have this tech out of nowhere came from some contact like experience where a being that had higher intelligence came in to a lower intelligence or conscious civilization and shared some things and became deities and became worshipped. And over time, these things play out. They're just like they're ways to like control people. So I think it's been going on for a long time. And we're at the precipice of another one starting to happen. And the graduation from it into fourth density is being able to make it through that and not get psyoped again.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that physically looks like, if there's an actual split of realities, like physically, or we all still like stay in this bubble, or maybe people don't make it, whoever doesn't make it through, like they aren't here, they die. I don't know what it is, but there's just something to that trickster element and the idea that like to connect in a fourth density level, I think there are no secrets. There's nothing you're hiding from. You see each other immediately and you see everything that's there in that being. And if everyone is empowered and all of they're in control and you connect, I think there's probably experiences that we could have never even imagined that are possible to have in that, which is probably why we spend, thousands, millions of years in each density, because there's just so much diverse things to experience when you have like an upgrade of possibilities. But yeah, so I just, the contact thing has always been something I still feel like it doesn't have to happen, but if it's going to happen and be like catalyze growth for individuals that's balanced, it's going to be individual. And the only time I think it really is like necessary to happen collectively is if there is some kind of like threat that needs to be stopped because it's going to affect like more than just the earth. So like a nuclear thing or there's like a commentary kind of like bombardment of things that like then maybe somebody would come down and like adjust things. But I still don't think that's how it would occur, because I think the real way these other beings and other dimensions are actually influencing this reality is through psychic stuff. It's through like backdoor places. It's never going to need to be on the news in a public arena, you know?
Yeah, but if everyone woke up out of the Matrix and stopped fighting with each other, I don't mean like each other. I mean realized, like started to see each other, I guess I want to say. Like the division specifically is everyone's casting everyone else in the Matrix, casting everyone else into a character. They're not yet able to go, for me, you are playing the role of someone who hates women. For you, you believe that you're fighting against the system. Like being able to hold the paradox of how I am experiencing this person because of and I'm just using like a political example right now that's like out there a lot, right? Is everyone's just casting, which I think is interesting, casting the characters of their reality and imposing the role that they're playing in your life onto who these people believe themselves to be. And both of those things exist and they're both valid. But the casting the character according to your experience of them, especially if you've put like zero effort into actually seeing them for how they see themselves to be, it's just separation consciousness. That's it. And it's the Maya, it's the Matrix, it's the illusion. And if you want to get out of the illusion, you have to play with the awareness of, what if I step out of my defenses and my triggers and whatever, and I start to see you from your perspective? What if I stopped analyzing your behavior in personal relationships? Even if I stop analyzing your behavior from the position of my own fear of rejection, my own fear of abandonment, my own critical eye, or trying to get ahead of the thing, and look at your behaviors from your experiences, you know, starting to get like curious about our own internal experiences and others' internal experiences, because what is trying to come into focus is that we are the same organism having separate experiences. We are experiencing each other as separate organisms, and many of us are experiencing most others as enemies. And it just keeps the matrix going. Now, if we were able to move past that in a couple of years, which I do think is possible, I do think we are like, consciousness is accelerating very, very fast. And I think maybe I'm privileged in the bubble that I live in, that I get to do sessions and stuff, and I get to really kind of see this. I think it's going way faster than anyone gives credit to. If we reached a point where the majority of the collective, because a lot of people that we perceive out there are just kind of holograms, right? The majority of the collective consciousness had this spaciousness of awareness, you could introduce physical alien beings as like we're just going a completely different direction with consciousness, and this is the premise of reality now. Like that totally fits for me. It just does not get introduced into this level of consciousness for any reason other than a power grab, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
but
and not through the government, not through any kind of power.
No. It even being in the same conversation as the government. I could be wrong because this is all unprecedented time, so it's not like I have life experience to draw from here, but it just doesn't make any fucking sense to me.
Yeah.
Like there was no government in anything the aliens ever showed me. It was just like land ownership didn't exist. It was just a completely different paradigm. And so that just doesn't resonate with anything I understand to be true. Aliens living among us and us finding out we were aliens living in human suits, like that all resonates. But to tie those two things together just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know. Lacey, what are your thoughts? You don't want to? No. Okay.
No thoughts. Yeah, I mean, this is like, I don't know if I got across clearly what I'm thinking on the inside. I did my best, but I think we are in this like weird fucking transition. It's like there's so many different ways to try to understand what's going on, the change, where's the positive sides of this, where's our way out of the chaos. But I do think it's just overall, like, there seems to be an inherent trickster element to every aspect of it, which means at all times having a like very keen discernment through whatever feels best, but also like everything's paradoxical, which that's the Bashar thing's perfect. It's like this guy has a lot of great things to say, but then there's this very controversial, seemingly biased statement that makes you question everything that this person stands for. There's something to it. Like most things that are like extremely paradoxical right now, I think are things to ponder on a lot, you know? But yeah, that's all I got.
All right. So what did I want to say? A lot of people have asked about the nervous system work I did. And my answer to that is that I have a Patreon and it is free. There is a free tier. You don't have to pay for it. You just have to sign up. And a couple of these videos might even be public. I don't know. But there is a collection where you can click and get access to a full long video, multiple long videos if you're on the paid Patreon. There's a collection that says nervous system that has all the nervous system stuff that I've ever talked about or done. But I did a thing called SSP, the Safe and Sound Protocol, where I listened to music and the music is tuned to a different frequency that causes your nervous system to move around from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic. And it helped me get out of functional freeze. It's perhaps cost prohibitive for some. I don't know. There are lots of free resources on the internet. Irene Lyon, Lyon, is also a great resource. I think with most things, it's not a one size fits all. And I just assume that whatever I need for a treatment is within my means to get. You can find the person that I did SSP with at nexperiencer.com, as in N-A-N, experiencer.com. Lacey's actually starting SSP. Just started SSP as well. She already pushed her mic away because she's kicked herself off the podcast. But hey, Lacey, can you put your microphone back? Where can people find you?
You can find me at laceyfree.com or on Instagram at laceysfree. I have a podcast called Horror Pod.
HOAR.
Yep, HOAR pod on TikTok at Horror Pod.
What about you, Mark?
She's a hoarder.
Mark's itching to do sessions.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Suitnop. The S is a 5. And then I have on my link tree, there's a place where you do book sessions to talk about being a creative, being an individual, creativity, consciousness, projector stuff, human design. And if the sessions aren't open, when you look at it, just check back because it's moving around all the time. And there's all kinds of stuff opening always.
Okay. And then lastly, we have a starseed crystal available.
I was going to say that earlier. Damn it.
It is blue. It is in the shape of an arm.
If you put it on your pineal gland, you will see God.
You'll get it and you'll overthrow the government. All right. Love you. Bye.